The second day of the cardiology summit in Vienna, Donald's phone buzzed insistently against his leg. He slipped out of the darkened lecture hall. 3 missed calls from Donna. She never called during his conferences. Something was off.
Donald, I sold the vineyard.
What? Donna, what are you talking about?
The Chianti property. I signed the papers last week. The wire cleared this morning.
You sold our vineyard? Without asking me? That was our 25th anniversary?
It's done, Donald. I didn't think you'd mind. You're never there anyway.
Donald's hand tightened around the phone. The line went dead. For a long moment, he didn't move.
She sold it. The one place that ever felt like mine.
On his phone, the photo of the vineyard he had taken at sunrise last spring stared back. It was already someone else's land.
You have to do something. She sold it without my knowledge. There must be a way to stop it. The lawyer was blunt. The wire cleared, deed transferred. No judge would overturn it. It's Donald. You sold my vineyard. Tell me who bought it. When do they take possession? The broker said the new owner was already there, walking the rows. It was too late for anything. I have to see it. I have to go back.
He booked the next flight to Florence, abandoned the summit, and threw clothes into a bag. 30 minutes later, he was in a taxi to the airport, leaving the conference without a word.
What am I doing? It's not mine anymore, but I can't stay here. The vineyard, the photo on his phone, every row, every stone, now it belonged to a stranger.
He had no plan, no power to change anything. Only a need to stand on that ground one more time. The taxi wound through olive groves and cypress-lined roads. Every turn pulled him closer to the place that was no longer his.
I should have planted myself here and never left. Now some stranger is pruning my vines.
You're buying a ruin, Donald. What do we need a vineyard for?
Stay, Donald. Please, just a little longer.
The taxi slowed at the gravel drive. The old stone farmhouse emerged behind a row of sentinel cypresses.
Whoever she was, the new owner, she was inside, and I had no right to be here.
He paid the driver and stood alone on the road, the evening air thick with the scent of ripening grapes. He walked to the wooden fence at the vineyard's edge. Under his palm, the wood was warm from the day's sun.
There, a lamp flickered in the kitchen window. She was home.
He took one step, then another, toward the door he had once painted himself. The story was about to change. He bypassed the front door and followed the gravel path around the side, moving quickly toward the vines where the light had been. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat stood among the rows, her back to him, her fingers gently wrapping a green tendril. She heard his footsteps and turned slowly, the hat brim still casting her face into shadow. Then she raised the hat, and the face beneath was unmistakable. Time had not erased those features.
Donald froze. His mind refused the image. No, it can't be.
She said his name, barely a whisper, as if testing whether the words still held.
He answered with her own name, pulled from a grave he'd kept sealed for decades.
The old farmhouse loomed in the dusk, silent witness to the impossibility.
Maria, the buyer, the woman he'd abandoned in Florence, the last person he expected.
They stood, separated by a few feet and an ocean of years, the vineyard holding its breath. Maria led him inside, through the familiar arched doorway. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and old wood. She gestured to a chair and poured 2 glasses of deep red wine.
My husband, Carlo, died 2 years ago. After the funeral, I needed something to fill my hands. I returned to art restoration. When this property appeared on the listings, my broker called. He knew I had once loved a man who dreamed of a vineyard.
She rose, walked to an old oak desk in the corner, and pulled open a drawer. Inside were magazine clippings, medical journals, and a photo of him receiving an award.
She had tracked his career. Every surgery, every honor. For 45 years, she had been a silent witness to a life he lived without her.
I never stopped caring, Donald. Buying this vineyard was not an investment. It was a way to keep a piece of you.
Why, Maria? Why hold on this long to someone who walked away?
Some loves only wait. They don't demand. They don't forget. They simply remain, like these hills.
The room felt too small. Every word she spoke pressed against the walls of his carefully built life.
He set down the wine, a chasm opening between the betrayal of his wife and the quiet devotion of a woman who had never really let him go. The next morning, they walked among the Sangiovese vines. The silence was easier now, but questions hung in the air like the scent of ripening grapes.
You remember this spot? Under this arbor, you kissed me for the first time. 45 years ago, but I still feel the sun on my face.
The memory stabbed. His wedding band felt like a shackle on his hand.
His phone buzzed. Donna's name lit the screen.
Where are you, Donald? The summit ended 2 days ago. I called your hotel.
I needed to see the vineyard one last time. I'll fly home tomorrow.
From the vineyard, Maria watched his silhouette. She didn't need to hear the words. She knew.
She was right. He had to go back, face what was left of his marriage. But every step away from this place felt wrong. When things are clear, I'll return, I promise.
That evening, he packed his bag in the small guest room. Maria watched from the doorway, her faith in that promise already flickering. The house hung in silence. He dropped his bag in the hallway and followed the rhythmic chop of a knife. In the kitchen, Donna sliced vegetables with cold efficiency, her back to the door, as if he were already a ghost.
Why, Donna? That vineyard was ours. You sold it without a word, like an old coat.
You were never there. It was your escape, not my home. I didn't think you'd care.
It was our 25th anniversary. That place was for us. Did any of it matter to you?
Maybe I need a life too, Donald. Something that's just mine. The vineyard was your dream, not ours. I'm done waiting.
His eyes fell on a glossy brochure on the counter. Portugal, sunny and promising. His stomach clenched. What about this? Planning another secret sale? Or is this just a vacation you forgot to mention?
That's my business. You've been absent for years. I'm just arranging my own peace.
The knife resumed its rhythm. The conversation was over, but the war had just begun. Donald couldn't sleep. He walked through the dark living room to Donna's study, the door she always kept locked swinging open under his hand. Her email was open. Richard, darling, once the vineyard sells, we'll have enough for the villa in Algarve. Another message, older, read, Donald will never know. He's too sentimental about that land.
2 years. Every trip, every cool silence. She had been planning this with someone else while he poured himself into the vineyard.
He printed the chain of emails, his hands moving like a surgeon's, precise and steady, while inside everything shattered. When he turned, Donna was in the doorway. She saw the papers. Her face didn't flicker.
How long, Donna? How long have you been with Richard?
Long enough. I'm not going to apologize for wanting to be happy, Donald.
The word hung between them. Happy. Built on the ashes of 25 years and a vineyard sold for another man's dream. He dropped the printouts on the desk. The sound was the period at the end of their marriage.
I'm calling a lawyer in the morning. I want a divorce, Donna.
I assumed you would. Richard and I have already discussed it.
That night, he carried his clothes to the guest bedroom. She didn't look up from her book. Lawyers were summoned, assets appraised. The house on Maple Street became a balance sheet.
25 years, reduced to a signature and a date.
He signed the separation agreement in a downtown office, the pen scratching like a scalpel across old skin.
She had already packed her jewelry and her passport. The other half of the closet was empty.
In the silent living room, he lifted a framed photo of their daughter from the mantel. The only thing he'd keep. He walked through the house, touching the walls he had painted, the floor he had sanded. It already felt like a stranger's house. The divorce papers were filed. The house fell silent, a crime scene of a life dismantled. Time passed in solitary rituals. Coffee for one, a garden that demanded nothing, 3 trips to the lawyer before the divorce was final. Donna moved to Portugal before the ink was dry. He didn't watch her leave.
He caught himself once, watching a sunset the color of Chianti Hills. He pulled the blinds and didn't look again.
A year passed. The house grew around his silence like a shell. One afternoon, a brown paper parcel sat on his doorstep. Italian stamps, no return address. Inside, a single photograph, the restored chapel, candles burning. A note in elegant script, "I restored our chapel. If you ever want to see it, you know where I am. Maria?"
His fingers traced the photograph, the old stone, the new altar. She had kept her promise. Something long asleep stirred in his chest, a dangerous, tender hope.
He set the photo on the mantel next to his daughter's picture. The first new thing in a year. Weeks passed. The note sat in his pocket, softened at the folds. At night, he'd set it on the nightstand, read it, and say nothing. One morning, he sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a single sheet of paper. He wrote 3 words, "Maria, I'll come."
He didn't add more. No explanations, no apologies. Just the words she'd been waiting 45 years to hear.
He sealed the envelope and walked it to the mailbox before his doubt could catch up. 2 days later, he stood in the airport terminal with a small leather bag and the photograph of the chapel tucked into his breast pocket.
He had no plan, no certainty, but the emptiness of his house had become heavier than the risk.
On the plane, he didn't open a book or sip a drink. He just held the photograph, his thumb over the candle flame.
For the first time in a year, his mind was quiet, not empty, still, like the chapel itself waiting.
The flight attendant announced their descent into Florence. The hills of Tuscany were waiting. He tucked the photo back into his pocket and watched the earth rise up to meet him. The gravel path from the road to the vineyard felt shorter than he remembered. Workers he didn't know touched their caps as he passed. The chapel doors stood open. The smell of beeswax and stone drifted out into the evening. Inside, Maria was on her knees, polishing the wood of the front pew. Her movements were slow, reverent. She turned. No gasp, no start. Just the quiet unfolding of a face that had been waiting.
You came?
You asked.
They stood in the doorway. The space between them was filled with every unsaid word of 45 years.
Something knotted in his chest. Something that hadn't breathed in years loosened.
She had rehearsed 1,000 sentences for this moment. None of them fit.
The chapel held its breath. Outside, the vineyard stretched toward the horizon, unchanged, waiting. Maria lifted a long match and touched it to a fresh candle on the altar. The flame caught, revealing a brass plaque beneath.
I did this thinking of you. The frescoes are mine, but the shape of the chapel, that was your dream.
Donald leaned closer to the plaque. It read, "For D, who taught me what love could be." His finger traced the engraved letters. A stone lodged itself in his throat.
I didn't expect this.
I know.
She let the silence stretch, then brushed his arm. "Come, let's have coffee. The terrace is cool now." They walked to the terrace overlooking the vineyard. 2 espresso cups waited, the chapel a small silhouette in the distance.
She had built him a memorial. But was it for a ghost, or a man who might stay?
They sipped the bitter liquid in a quiet that felt, for the first time in decades, like the start of something.
I signed the final decree 6 months ago. She'd been seeing someone else for 2 years, used the vineyard money for their new start. The whole time I was investing in that vineyard, she was planning her exit. I was blind.
Maria set down her cup, her face unchanged. She had lived through her own long grief.
Carlo was a good man. But there was always a shadow in our marriage. A third chair at the table. He knew my heart had been left in Florence. It wasn't fair to him.
Did you ever marry thinking of me?
Every day.
The admission hung in the air. Neither reached for more words.
This was no memorial. This was a door left open.
They sat as the sun finished its descent, the vineyard turning indigo, the risk of hurt now real as morning. The morning arrived cool and veiled. Donald found Maria already among the vines, her basket half full of dew-heavy clusters.
I've thought about what I threw away every day for 40 years. The morning I left Florence, I told myself I was doing the right thing.
She set down the basket and turned toward him, the distance between them charged with every unsaid thing.
The impulse to reach for her hand was a physical ache, as if his fingers remembered what his mind had buried.
His fingers twitched forward, then stopped mid-air, a hesitation of a heartbeat that held half a lifetime.
We can't rewrite it, Donald. But we're here now.
She touched his arm, light, brief, a promise without demand, and then withdrew.
He wanted to close the distance, but the fear of another loss was a wall he had built with both hands.
They caught each other's eyes, and the air between them held everything they couldn't yet say. They walked back to the farmhouse in charged silence, the mist lifting, everything ahead still unclaimed. That evening, over a simple meal of bread and oil, Donald set down his fork. The question he had been carrying finally left his chest.
I don't want to leave, Maria. Not as a guest. I want to work the land here.
Maria paused, her hands still. The silence stretched, but it wasn't unkind.
Yes, you should. I didn't restore the chapel for a ghost, Donald. I did it for you.
She rose and led him outside, along the ivy-covered wall to the small stone guest house. He stood on the doorstep, a small bag at his feet. The door was open.
This has always been yours, Donald.
That night, he lay in the narrow bed, watching the moonlight play on the old stone walls. Through the open window, the sound of the vines rustling in the wind was a lullaby he hadn't known he needed.
He was home.
Weeks folded into one another. Donald learned the weight of the secateurs, the angle of the sun on the Sangiovese, the silence that spoke more than words. He fumbled a twist, and Maria reached over, her hands adjusting his grip with a light, practiced touch.
Like this. The vine wants to grow upward. You're just reminding it.
Her touch no longer startled him. It had become part of the morning, as steady as the dawn.
On market days, they loaded crates of purple clusters. Maria haggled with the old women. Donald counted coins, earning nods of approval.
They'll know these grapes were grown by a surgeon's hands.
And an artist's eye.
Evenings they cooked, she chopped, he stirred, a quiet choreography learned without a lesson. One night, he found her asleep in the worn leather chair, a folded blanket on the armrest. He shook it out and covered her.
Thank you, Maria.
The harvest festival arrived without announcement, as if the vines themselves had called it. Long tables were set between the rows, strung with lanterns that swayed in the warm evening breeze. Neighbors filled the benches, grape pickers, olive farmers, the old women who sold cheese. A weathered man raised his glass. To the new caretaker of this old land.
Donald stood, his own glass lifted. Thank you. But this land, it's been taking care of me more than I've ever taken care of it.
His voice was rough with emotion, but his eyes kept returning to Maria at the far end of the table. The chatter of the table faded to a distant hum. The clinking of glasses became faint. For a suspended moment, there was only her face, lit by the lanterns.
He had spent 40 years running from this, a lifetime burying it. Now, in the middle of a harvest, it stood up and claimed him. He loved her. The knowledge was not a lightning strike. It was a sunrise that had been gathering for 45 years, unnoticed until now.
He lowered his glass and sat down, the world rushing back with its noise and laughter. Across the table, Maria caught his eye and smiled, a smile that held the chapel, the vines, the life he had almost missed. The dinner broke up with laughter and embraces. Donald found Maria and, without a word, gestured toward the path that led to the chapel. They walked in silence, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. Above, the stars pressed close, as if listening.
Maria, stop. I need to say this. I should never have let you go. 45 years I've carried that mistake. I'm not letting you go again. I love you, Maria. I've always loved you.
Her eyes glistened. She stepped closer, her voice barely above a murmur. I know. I've always known.
She reached up and straightened the collar of his linen shirt. a gesture so intimate and ordinary that it broke the last wall. He took her hand, their fingers interlaced as if they had been doing it for decades. They stood there in the moonlight, the restored chapel behind them, the past finally, irrevocably forgiven. The second chance was sealed, not with a kiss, but with the quiet certainty of two people who had finally stopped running. The turning of seasons brought the final severance. At the kitchen table, he signed the papers that sold the house in America, closing a chapter that had ended long before. He walked through the dew-wet vineyard toward the chapel, the morning light a promise on the hills. Inside, Maria was arranging wildflowers on the altar, her movements gentle as a prayer. The old priest had come from the village. He spoke simple words over them, blessing not a wedding but a homecoming. When the quiet was done, Donald removed the gold band from his finger, the last chain he hadn't known he still wore, and slipped it into his pocket.
She said nothing, only took his bare hand and pressed it to her cheek.
They stepped outside into the Italian sun. Together, they climbed the gentle hill beside the chapel, the sky beginning to blush with evening.
I am where I was always meant to be.
The vines rustled in the breeze, a soft applause for a second chance 45 years in the making. Evenings had become their time. They walked the vineyard rows, the fading light gilding the leaves, no destination needed.
I thought my life was over. That morning in Vienna, I was sure of it. Turns out it was just waiting.
For both of us.
They climbed the gentle hill beside the chapel and sat on the stone bench where years ago they had first spoken of the future.
We made it, didn't we?
Maria didn't answer with words. She simply leaned her head on his shoulder, the gesture complete and effortless. The sun sank lower, painting the chapel and the vines in shades of rose and amber. They didn't need to speak. Everything that had led them here, the betrayal, the years alone, the letter, the restored chapel, felt inevitable, like vines finding their way to the sun. The quiet was not an end, but a holding, a moment that asked nothing more of them except to be present. And so they remained, two figures on a Tuscan hill, as the day surrendered to the stars. 45 years of waiting, and the land had known all along. It had held the roots through every winter. Their hands, weathered and steady, laced together without thought. A map of every year they'd missed, and every year they'd now share. In the chapel, the plaque still read for D, who taught me what love could be. A promise made stone long before he understood it. Mornings in the vines, pruning and tying, learning the language of the soil, no grand gestures, only the quiet rhythm of togetherness. Evenings at the wooden table, lamplight pooling on plates of pasta, laughter over nothing. The easy grace of a life earned. Harvests came and went, each one a testament. The wine from those grapes carried the taste of something rare, a second beginning. They walked the same path every evening, two silhouettes against the gold. The vineyard was no longer a monument to loss. It was proof that love could wait, that it could rebuild. Donald had once believed his story was over, but some vineyards are planted for a lifetime, others for a second chance. This one did not bloom in a single season. It waited, dormant beneath the soil, for 45 years. And when it finally broke through, it was stronger than anything that came before. The vineyard grew. They grew, and the hills of Tuscany continued their ancient quiet watch, keeping safe the truest thing they had ever known.